turning it into a fireball.
Have you guys ever watched F1 crashes in slow motion? It's crazy how fast everything falls apart. That's all it takes, less than a second, for control to vanish completely.
55 seconds. To you and me, 55 seconds is nothing. They pass us by in the blink of an eye. But for Niki Lauda, 55 seconds stretched into an eternity. It was in those 55 seconds that the Formula One world champion came face to face with death. And it was in those 55 seconds that he spat at death's door, picked up his helmet, and walked out.
At those temperatures, skin can reach third-degree burns in under a second. The heat is so extreme it kills nerve endings almost instantly. Your body can't even process the pain before it shuts down.
Niki Lauda had dominated the 1976 season up until the 10th round at the Nürburgring, racking up 61 points, 45 more than his rival James Hunt. By the 1976 season, he had claimed the mantle of the fastest driver on the grid by far. Lauda was not a man who was afraid of standing up for himself. He knew he was capable of getting through anything, doing anything, winning anything.
Bro, I don't even get it. How big of a deal is it being the fastest F1 driver? Like, what does that mean? It's insane, man. That's like being the best fighter pilot on Earth. Except your jet's 2 inches off the ground and doing 200 miles an hour.
So when the cars lined up on the grid at the Nürburgring in 1976, another championship victory for Ferrari and Lauda seemed all but inevitable. The Nürburgring, winding through the densely forested Eifel Mountains, had an incredibly notorious reputation for modern Grand Prix motorcars, having already claimed 5 lives.
At Nürburgring, if the driver even switched the wheel wrong, the car could rocket straight into the trees. They had barely any guardrails back then, and sometimes the crash set the whole thing on fire before rescue even got there. That's why they called it the Green Hell.
Lauda understandably had voiced his concerns and advocated for a boycott at a Grand Prix Drivers Association meeting, pointing out the unacceptable standards of the fire engines and safety crews. And yet, Lauda would be outvoted by the rest of the grid, and the race would go ahead. Time would bring Lauda's fears to life. And fast. When Lauda lined up in second on the grid, he had no idea how hard he would have to cling to life on the second lap.
People never take danger seriously until it's staring them in the face. Lauda tried to stop the race because he knew the track was a death trap waiting for its moment. Yeah, and it's crazy how confidence blinds people. They thought skill could outrun danger until danger proved it can drive faster. Sometimes it takes one crash to remind everyone even champions aren't invincible.
A light shower before the start had convinced Lauda that he should start the race with rain tires. Once the race started though, Lauda realized his mistake and rushed into the pits after the first lap to change for slicks and tore off to make up some ground. However, with his new tires struggling to get warmed up, he lost control at Bergwerk on the second lap, and that is when all hell broke loose.
Back then, they didn't have no fancy tire warmers or none of that. They just threw them on and prayed the rubber gripped. But if those tires stayed cold for even a few corners, that car might as well be driving on glass. No control, no mercy.
The old footage of this near-fatal accident has an eerie quality to it. Watching the approach to the corner, barely anyone could tell how quickly this arrow-like car would transform into a blazing death trap. Given that the race had just begun, the car still contained a full load of fuel. Much of one side of the car was sheared off upon impact, turning it into a fireball spinning across the track, with the car quickly becoming engulfed by flames.
Bro, that fire don't just burn skin, it burns everything it touches. Inside that cockpit, the air itself turns lethal. Every breath feeling like you inhaling flames. That's the craziest part. You can't just hop out. The gear's heavy, the cockpit's tight, and the belt locks you in like a cage. By the time you're unstrapping, the fire's burning everything around you, including you.
And for Lauda, that was bad enough. But things would get worse yet. Brett Lunger's Surtees, approaching the bend, made efforts to brake, but still collided head-on with the burning Ferrari, redirecting the car towards the track's edge and consuming precious seconds. Seconds that could be the difference between life and death.
When a car is packed with fuel, that flame feeds itself, turning seconds into a chain reaction. Every part that burns creates more heat, more smoke, and less chance to breathe.
The events that followed vary, depending on the account you consider. The excerpt from Maurice Hamilton's 2020 book, Niki Lauda, the biography, is one that is widely accepted. In this account, Hamilton describes a critical moment during the Nürburgring race, where only one marshal, ill-equipped and lacking proper attire, was present. Faced with the urgency of the situation, the drivers knew they had to act swiftly.
The marshals, the safety crew, the firefighter, the medic, all rolled into one. Having just one out there means he's improvising in chaos, praying he guesses right before somebody dies. Damn, Kev, imagine watching it happen knowing you can't save him fast enough. That kind of helplessness gonna haunt you forever, dog.
Harold Ertel managed to locate a fire extinguisher and activate it to douse the cockpit. Brett Lunger, a seasoned veteran from the Vietnam War, positioned himself at the car's center. Seconds continued to pass for the drivers, for the crews, for the audience, but for Lauda, it felt like a lifetime. Progress felt difficult until Mazzario, a former Ferrari driver familiar with seatbelt mechanisms, bravely entered the intense heat and released the buckle of Lauda's 6-point harness.
Yo, that heat was wild. Close enough to melt the visor off your helmet. Even standing near it for a few seconds could scorch through the suit. They weren't just pulling Lauda out. They were basically walking into an oven to save him.
Mazzario vividly recalled the difficulty of this situation, stating it wasn't easy. Niki was obviously in agony, straining hard against the belt, trying to get away from the flames. Thank God he eventually lost consciousness. It was only when he relaxed that I could free the buckle. The release of body weight caused Lunger to topple over, taking Lauda with him. Mazzario's heroic intervention that day likely saved Lauda's life.
When people act together in moments like that, it rewires what's possible. One person's courage doesn't just save a life. It redefines the limits for everyone who witnesses it. That's how heroes create more of themselves. Facts, but ripples don't choose direction. One act of courage can spark kindness, but one act of cruelty can echo just as far. People copy what they see, good or bad, and that's how history keeps repeating itself.
Lauda never forgot these acts of bravery and remained grateful to the Italian throughout his life. Niki said, "There was a guy called Arturo Mazzario who jumped into the fire alone and pulled me out of the wreckage. So I survived. So he really saved my life there, because a couple of seconds more, I would have never made it." Niki's injuries were severe, particularly to his head and hands, accompanied by a broken collarbone. He was swiftly airlifted to the hospital, where his condition deteriorated rapidly.
I had someone like that once. He didn't save my life, but he gave me a chance when nobody else would. A job that got me off the edge. You never forget people like that. Years pass, but that moment still feels untouched by time.
In fact, it became so bad that many started preparing for his death. A priest was even called to administer the last rites 3 days after the harrowing crash. And yet, Lauda would survive. And according to the legend, once Lauda woke up, he said, "Tell the priest to I'm still alive."
There's something wild about that kind of defiance. When the body's failing, but the mind still throws a punch at death itself. That's survival on a whole different frequency. Man, that's real. When you staring death down, all that tough talk vanishes. Most fold, but some flip the script. Look death down in the face like, "You ain't taking me yet." That's a soul fighting for overtime.
For 55 agonizing seconds, Lauda had been in hell. His injuries were terrible, causing him to lose his eyelids, practically all of his right ear, and his scalp to burn so badly he was never seen in public without a hat.
I wonder if he could have ever rebuilt his face. Maybe with surgery or something? But then again, with burns that deep, you're not replacing skin, you're replacing identity. Some damage just don't got a reset button.
Later, he would remember, "I asked a nurse in the burns clinic, when can I look in the mirror? Anytime," she said. It should never have been allowed. She switched on a neon light, and because of the heat and the water retention, my head went straight into my shoulders. Shit, I thought. Of course, it got better and better. I had seen my injuries at their worst. Despite the grave incident, Lauda was resolute not only to return to racing, but also to defend his world title.
That's wild. Seeing yourself like that and still choosing to move forward? I don't even know if I could do that, bro. Most people can't even handle a bad photo, let alone a new face. Makes you realize how much confidence is tied to what we see in the mirror. After that kind of fire, the mirror don't mean nothing. Ain't about who you were, it's about what's still inside when the outside is gone.
Less than a month after the accident, he demonstrated his readiness to Ferrari's team management and Enzo Ferrari himself by showing up at the Fiorano test track near Bologna. It was a powerful statement, as Ferrari had already enlisted a replacement driver within a day of the accident, a move that deeply offended Lauda, given his reigning world champion status. He had a world championship to defend and had already missed 2 races. Missing another was not an option.
This is a prime example of what happens when pain stops being a setback and turns into proof. It ain't about what burned or what broke. It's about what refused to quit when everything said it should have.
And just 33 days after a dance with death at the Nürburgring, with burns still painful and bandages holding him together, the world champion would finish 4th at Monza. He had outraced death. As the season's grand finale roared into Tokyo, Lauda still led Hunt by a solid 3 points, yet relentless pain coupled with impaired vision due to the fiery damage to his tear ducts forced Lauda into a decision he did not want: retirement from the race.
I bet you half of the safety rules they got right now trace back to him. Every car, every helmet, every rescue drill, he's in all of it. That man's scars built the manual everyone else gets to survive by. That's a different level of willpower, bro. Getting beat by someone after surviving what he did? Most people would have quit long before that. But he didn't lose because he gave up. He lost because his body just couldn't keep going.
This opened the door for James Hunt to win the title, and yet the spotlight remained on the man once dubbed the Rat. He had come back from a situation that shouldn't have been humanely possible to survive. He was an icon that had become synonymous with the sport, and yet it was those 55 seconds that defined everything he did. The memory of the crash stayed in his side mirrors all his life.
I gotta be real, man. As sad as what happened to him, that crash made him more than a champion. If it never happened, maybe the world would have just seen another driver. But because of it, they saw a legend.
Following him into every walk of life, he would pass away on May 20th, 2019, a few months after receiving a lung transplant.
Some stories don't end when the person does. They just change hands. Cause sometimes what you survive turns into someone else's warning or their reason to keep going. If his story isn't the definition of not giving up, I don't know what is. May he rest in peace.
A consequence of the toxic fumes he had breathed in while firmly strapped into the cockpit 4 decades prior.